to watch a movie. Yo, Michael, what's up?
Yes.
Excuse me.
What do you want?
Well, I was about to watch one of my favorite movies, and I was going to see if you wanted to join me.
What was the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie?
I have no clue, Dur. I didn't bother to check.
Ugh. Did the Hollywood Reporter or the New Yorker give it a pass or fail grade?
I really couldn't tell you, Dur. It's just a movie I like, and I'm watching it again.
Did Dork Davidson tweet about this film? And if he did he use starry-eyed emojis or the vomit emoji?
You know, Dur, I think I'm going to watch this one alone. Thanks anyway, though.
Whatever. I have to go submit my blog anyway.
Jeez, and I thought I was supposed to be the critic. Hey everyone, welcome to Tony's Top 5. I'm Tony, and every week we pick a different topic, and I list my 5 favorite things about that topic. So last week I decided to ruffle some feathers and talk about 5 movies that everyone loves, but I just can't stand. So I figured it's only fair to kind of put the shoe on the other foot, or however you would say it. I don't know why that saying escaped me. And talk about 5 movies that I love, but everyone in the world seems to shit on. Now, as watchers of this channel have figured out, I tend to fancy myself as something of a film critic. However, I'm not always right. There are some movies out there that I just completely misjudge. But I don't care, because I still like them. So what'll happen is everyone will say that a movie is bad. But then I watch it and I really don't see what's so wrong with it. I'm like, this actually seems like a good film. Why is everybody hating on it? And then when I admit that I like it, everybody looks at me like I have 6 heads. So I didn't lay out too many ground rules for this one, kind of like I did last time. Really, the only thing is, I'm not going to go over movies that are obviously just goofs. You know, like The Room or Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Those are films that I watch just so I can make jokes on the whole time. Usually I have to have somebody else with me, or it's no fun because I'm just cracking jokes to myself. These are movies that everyone thinks are bad, but not only do I like these movies, but I think they're good movies too. So that's really all that we're going to go by on this list. Now, without wasting any more time, let's get to our number 5 on our list of movies that everyone seems to hate, but I actually like. Congo. Now, Congo is a movie that I loved when I was a little kid, and I still love it to this day. It's a really cool action-adventure flick that takes place in Africa. It's got some really cool scenery of like the jungle, mountain terrain, and it breaks down some key elements of the turmoil that goes on within the government in the Congo region, which I thought was pretty cool, and educational at the time too. Not to mention there were some really cool actors in monkey suits, or I guess ape suits as you would say, you know, that provided like acrobatics and stuff and made really kind of realistic looking gorillas in this movie. It was kind of comparable if you ever seen Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan. It was kind of a similar setup there. And I really liked that. I liked it much better than if it would have been made today and they would have just made the gorillas CGI. I can understand people thinking certain parts of this movie were a little bit corny. You know, like when Amy starts doing the ugly gorilla, go away. You know, or like the laser at the end. You know, it was a bit much. But to me, those things kind of just added to the coolness of the movie. What always kind of gets under my skin is that action movie junkies will knock this film. I mean, there's so many cool things in it, with the hippo attack when they're floating down the river on the rafts, the volcano eruption, and that scene where the gorillas attack the base camp at nighttime, and they have like that like set up electrical fence going on. I mean, it was just really cool. Look at this and tell me that that's not cool.
Monroe?
So this film was based off of the Michael Crichton novel of the same name. And we all know Michael Crichton basically ruled the 90s, with most of his novels being adapted into major blockbuster films. Also, there was a decent bit of star power in this movie. You had Ernie Hudson, Tim Curry, Laura Linney, and even the guy from Nip Tuck, who I guess is famous too. Oh, and Bruce Campbell's in the movie. Yeah, it's only for 5 minutes, but that's still good enough to make it a great movie in my book. All you need is at least 2 minutes of Bruce Campbell tops, and it's automatically blockbuster success. I'll forever be confused why people dog this movie so much. I mean, it was a beacon of my childhood, and it's one of those movies that if it's on today, I'll stop everything I'm doing to watch it. So, in my opinion, joke's on you guys. Alright, so moving on to number 4 on our list of movies that I love, but everyone in the world seems to hate. Mother. Mother was a strange bird. I mean, it was one of those movies that made people very uncomfortable, and it definitely made me uncomfortable, but I think that's why I liked it. I personally love having my emotions and my thoughts challenged throughout a movie. It kind of puts me on the edge and makes me feel more involved with it. For example, I felt like that when I was watching the movie Get Out. There were so many times where I wanted to reach into the screen and grab the main character and be like, what are you, nuts? Do this instead of this. It's a trap. This movie Mother was that times 10. The pace of this film goes from fast to slow, and you're constantly getting new characters added into the story, and some of them are more important than others. All in all, this film got a kind of average score from critics, and the audiences that saw it were very divided. So that kind of landed the film on the meh list. Like, nobody really wanted to call it good, but a lot of people wanted to call it bad. You know, where me, I was like, I love this film. Darren Aronofsky is one of my favorite directors, so maybe I was a little bit biased when it came to this film. The Wrestler and The Whale are 2 of my favorite movies from the past 15 years. But also, I thought the acting was great in this movie, too. Javier Bardem, I mean, he's great in everything he does, but he was very good in this film, too. But who really carried the movie was Jennifer Lawrence. Her character was a major step out of her comfort zone. In so many of her movies, she's this assertive, in-control character, where in this movie, she was confused and scared the whole time. She just wanted everything to go back to normal and enjoy her dream home with her husband. So I was really impressed with how she brought that character to life. This movie was a drama, thriller, and horror film all rolled into one. I wish more people liked this movie, but I've only met a handful of people that do. It seems like people were either put off by the uncomfortableness of this movie, or they just flat out didn't like the plot. I liked both. I also liked how it, added in these like subtle, well, not so subtle, like, religious undertones and everything. I thought it really brought the story to life. To me, it's always going to be a movie that I saw, and I really liked it, and I still really like it to this day. I've met a lot of people that when I tell them, that I didn't hate this movie and that I actually had a favorable opinion, they look at me like I'm crazy. But I don't care. I like what I like. All right, moving on to number 3 on our list of films that I love, but everyone seems to hate, The 13th Warrior. Now, this film was absolutely skewered by critics. I think to this day it holds like a 30% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is dumb, but that's critics for you. Movie snobs from every corner of the world love to hover their white coastal butt cheeks over top of this film and just shit all over it for no reason. And they don't even really have any details or facts to back it up with their opinion. It's just become a fad. I'm convinced of that. Because when you talk to audiences about this movie, especially guys that grew up, and I'm saying guys because this film was mainly geared towards men and young men and boys and everything, that watch this, whether they're millennials or Gen Xers or anything like that, they liked this movie. So similar to Congo, this was based off of a Michael Crichton novel. So Michael basically read the story Beowulf, the one that we were all forced to read our senior year of high school. Or at least it was my senior year. Maybe everybody else read it their freshman year and I was a bit behind. I don't know. We're not here to discuss that. But he basically read Beowulf and was like, yeah, this story's kind of meh. And honestly, it is a little bit meh. And he wrote Eaters of the Dead, which I thought was a much better story, and then from there it was adapted into a movie. Like we said, it's the 90s. Michael Crichton writes a book, you make a movie about it. Don't ask questions. I, for the life of me, can't understand what's wrong with this movie. I mean, the only thing I can look at and say, couldn't get away with that today, or maybe that wasn't very well thought through, is the fact that Antonio Banderas was the main character, and the main character was from the Arabian Peninsula, and Antonio Banderas is from Spain. But he still did a great job. It was still very convincing. This movie was scary, action-packed, and actually a pretty good adventure story. Yeah, there was some over-the-top violence, but no more than Braveheart, and the Academy couldn't stop throwing Oscars at that. Another cool thing about this film was the clash of cultures at the beginning of the story. You have Antonio Banderas' character, who hails from Arabic royalty, and he's forced to shack up with these savage Viking mercenaries that have horrible hygiene practices. And you get to see how they eventually start communicating with each other and eventually become basically brothers at the end. So I thought that was really cool character development. Another cool thing about this movie was it had a very clearly labeled and very scary enemy. And you got to watch this path of how they had to understand the enemy first before they could conquer it. So again, another really cool part of the story. I would definitely label this film as more critically hated than hated by audiences. Because like I said at the beginning, I talk to guys I grew up with or that are around the same age as me, and if they've seen this movie, they loved it. I think what ultimately hurt this movie was not a lot of people got out to see it, so there's some people that don't even know. Like if you said to a Gen Z, or hey, do you like the 13th Warrior? Unless their dad or their older brother showed it to them, chances are they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. But for me, this will always remain as one of my favorite action, adventure, fantasy movies. So critics, screw you, sit and spin. Alright, so let's get to number 2 on my list of movies that I love but everyone else seems to hate. Signs. Now I understand that it's very easy to shit on M. Night Shyamalan. I mean, he's put out a lot of dog shit over the years, and he's become a complete cliche for ridiculous plot twists. But let's not get so caught up in making fun of like his habits when it comes to certain movies that we forget that he got famous off of creating some really good movies in the beginning of his career. Everybody always talks about The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, but I really think that Signs was one of his better movies too. It's actually my favorite. It had a really good cast of actors, and it was a pretty believable family dynamic. You know, it wasn't like this traditional nuclear family. It was basically a father, his 2 kids, and then his younger brother that was living with them because their mom had passed away. You know, I just thought it was a really cool element. I thought Joaquin Phoenix and Mel Gibson had this really cool older brother, younger brother dynamic in the movie. You know, where one was kind of more conservative and clean cut and reserved, and the other one was, you know, a little bit more wild and had a more sketchy past and everything like that, but they got along and they really depended on each other, and you could tell there was a lot of love in that family relationship right there. So I thought that that was pretty cool, and even the kids were good. I'm not sure who played the daughter, but I do know that Rory Culkin played the son, and he was just a little kid in that movie, and he did really well too. I know it's hard doing a film about alien invasions and not feeling like, oh, well, how can this be any good since it's been done 1,000 times? But what I liked about this film is they kind of, the invasion and everything, they almost like 90% of it centered on this one family and their home out in this rural Pennsylvania cornfield. And basically just focused on their dynamic and their relationships. And then at the end, you know, it shows a lot of the invasion too. They work in a lot of scary stuff, but at the end of the day, it's more of a family movie. I know it had some corny parts with the kid's asthma at the end, Swing Away Meryl, and the girl leaving glasses of water all over the house. But, I mean, at the end, like, you know, it was kind of cool, you know, like it kind of brought everything together, you know, and the phrase that we use all the time in life, everything happens for a reason, it kind of brought it back to that theme. So, like I said, a little bit corny, but I liked it. I know it got on a lot of people's nerves that these advanced aliens that traveled all through space to come conquer Earth ended up being allergic to water. But is that really much different than War of the Worlds, where the same aliens came to Earth, but they were allergic to these common earthly pathogens? I don't think so. At the end of the day, I thought this was a good story with good characters. Now, this one didn't get skewered too bad by critics. It got actually a decent score. I believe it was around like 70 or 80%, something like that. Who really cares about that, though? But it's kind of one of those movies that everyone goofs on because it was in Scary Movie 3 and it has M. Night Shyamalan's name attached to it. I don't really care about any of that BS, though. So at the end of the day, I still like it, and it's one of my favorite movies. All right, we made it. Number 1 on my list of movies that I love, but everyone seems to hate, What Dreams May Come. Now, this movie got absolutely torched by critics. And then audiences were kind of a little bit divided on it, too. I mean, Jesus, even Family Guy threw a gut punch to this film.
Old House! I want to buy this!
Great. And as a bonus, I'll throw in What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams.
No, thank you.
No charge.
I do not want it.
But it's free, sir.
If that DVD even touches Roadhouse, I will kill you.
Now, I understand that people really may not have liked this movie or loved it as much as I did, but I couldn't understand why people hated it. Now, it's a pretty original story. Of course, it was based off of a novel of the same name, but it also had a pretty good amount of A-list actors in it, too. I mean, if I told you that you were going to see a film that was made in the 90s that had Robin Williams, Annabella Sciorra, Cuba Gooding Jr., and Max von Sydow in it, you couldn't wait to see this film. Much like Michael Crichton ruled the 90s with his books being adapted into films, Robin Williams ruled the 90s. If there was a story, he could turn it into a good one. He just had that power as an actor. If it was dog shit, he could turn it into Shinola. But regardless of how well Robin Williams did in this movie, and he did great, and so did all the other actors too, this film still got slammed, and slammed hard. This film touches on a lot of heavy subjects. Faith, death, soulmates, suicide. All of these are pretty heavy. And maybe all of those combined into one aren't something that a lot of people want to see on the big screen, and maybe that's why the film made people uncomfortable. I thought it was very tactful, though, in the way that it approached these subjects and still brought a lot of beauty into the situation. At the end of the day, the film was basically the whole plot and gist of it tied into one was just how much Robin Williams' character loved his wife, played by Annabella Sciorra. So it was kind of, in a way, a love story. So those topics I just mentioned, coupled with a few other things, are what I think turned a lot of critics and moviegoers off. Another complaint that really gets hurled at this movie a lot is that the ending sucked. That one I won't go into because there's probably a lot of people watching this that haven't seen the movie, but I agree the ending could have been a lot better. Apparently it was better in the book. I haven't read the book yet. But like I said, that can be said for a lot of good films out there. Like, yeah, the ending kind of messed it up a little bit. All in all, I really enjoyed this movie. It touched on a concept of God and heaven that really hadn't been explored on the big screen yet, and it had some really cool fantasy elements too. And on top of that, there was some really good music in it. I don't know who did the score for it, but it was very beautifully done. I tend to be biased towards Robin Williams movies, especially since his passing, but he really performed his heart out in this role. And on top of that, so did everyone else that was involved in this movie. I wish more people liked this film. I know I've said that about everything on the list, but this one especially, because it is fun to talk about with people that have seen this movie as well, especially those who liked it. But like I said, they're kind of few and far between. But yeah, that's it. Those are my top 5 movies that I love, but everyone seems to hate. If you haven't seen any of those movies, I recommend checking them out. Don't just go by my list just because I said they were good or because other people said that they suck. You know, form your own opinion about this. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. And always put your ideas for top 5 suggestions for the future videos in the comments section. I will take all of those into consideration. But again, thank you guys for watching and take care. I'll see you next week.